Hello, Beth.
Hi, Randy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Oh, I'm glad that we could be sitting here and talking together today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. So my name's Randy Wong-Westbrooke, and my pronouns are they, them. I'm originally a scenic designer, and I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, specifically on the land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. But I've just recently, as in like 48 hours ago, landed in Los Angeles, the land of the Chumash people, and I am a mixed race, non-binary transmasculine person with medium short, dark hair, translucent pink glasses, wearing a button-up navy blue floral shirt with a white background behind me.
Wonderful. And for those who don't know me, I am Beth Chin. I am an artist and designer. I have also been the author of a book called Being Mixed, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm joining you from Chicago and the native land of Kickapoo. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Apologize. But so I'm a mixed race woman, and I have wavy brown hair that I have up right now. I also have brown eyes, and I am wearing a pretty slick black blazer with a white shirt underneath it. So, all right, Randy, I wanted to start out today as we're talking about large scale art and immersive installations. And so I want to kind of start talking about at least what that is physically as art and kind of the physical process that you like to take going into it. So, say, like, maybe like taking a concept from start to finish, just think about like your process and maybe like any techniques that you prefer or materials you prefer to use. And
Oh, yeah, that's a big question. But I think just to talk about some of the most recent large scale work I've been doing, I've been involved with the Immersive Van Gogh exhibition that's been popping around in a few cities around the country. And I've been involved in San Francisco, Charlotte, North Carolina, Minneapolis, and Cleveland, mostly involved in some sculptural installation designs in their lobbies. The exhibition itself is designed by some wonderful Italian designers and creators and artists. But the front of the house, the lobby, is sort of the first place that any patrons will come and get a sense of what they're about to walk into for the greater exhibition. Um, so that's been such a unique opportunity to create sort of more sculptural pieces coming from my background in theater, which is a little more can be a little more encompassing of a whole world. Um, so creating things to go in a world, a lobby is like just kind of pivoting, I think, as far as what I am designing. But I think always I consider myself a visual storyteller. Um, Narrative doesn't always have to be through text. It can be about space and how space is arranged, the colors, the textures, the feeling of space. And so with large scale art, large scale immersive work, the scale is something that I think gives me such a I respond to space viscerally. Like I feel when something is constricting or awe-inspiring and impressive and large, or weird, or makes me feel uncomfortable, or like, oh, makes me excited, and or ooh, I want to touch that, or I really want to stand back and look at something. All of those things like are really coming, I think, from a visceral, embodied sense. And of course, in the process, there comes research, say for Van Gogh, like into his story and his life and his process, to see if there's something that we'd want to dive into. Van Gogh fine art paintings, they're only so big, and you typically go to museums, stand multiple feet away, and can't quite see the detail. So
oh,
with this artist specifically and his like impasto work with all that texture, and also him painting from an era that was over a century ago. We took sort of his impasto style work and blew it up to a different scale so we could really see it on such like an 8 foot sort of 8 foot tall paint stroke, or paint tubes that are like as big as us or as big as the little kids walking by, if not bigger. And I think for this sort of family friendly place, the whimsy of the size of things, but also the access to something that is maybe so small or hidden away in a museum somewhere, um, to bring it to them. But for me, is regardless if it's a theatrical space or this installation sort of work, um, it comes from visceral feelings about how the scale of a person will relate to it, and then how that then relates to the space we're in, or if it's out in the world, like what is the surrounding things that are influencing our sense of where we are and where we are to each other, and the shapes and things around us.
Yeah. I think there's just something that's very magical that comes with large scale art that just like it literally wows you because it's so grand and huge of a gesture of art can be. And so I was really curious about hearing about your process for one, just to kind of like break down like how does that magic begin? And so for example, I was on your portfolio site and I noticed that you did have some draftings done. And so I was actually curious, do you have an architectural background or is so how do you get into drafting and what's your process of making these sketches?
Yeah. So, well, I think yes, there are some examples of drafting on my website, and I think I have more that is not currently up there. But drafting, I think, is really just a tool, to I think carpenters and painters and fabricators are absolutely artists in their own right. And we have our own sort of language. But as far as sketches, like I will do some sketching. I sometimes jump a little more into kind of digital rendering of something. But even before then, though, I think it's about finding evocative imagery. Um, be it through how something is arranged, how buildings are laid out to each other, how this piece of fabric has been hung in the air, or the color of it, or the quality of light that's in a space, that evokes like an emotion, which then for me evokes a feeling, be it through the immensity or the diagonal unstableness of it, or the large massive groundedness of, like, say, a pyramid. um, I think I find that imagery and carry that feeling through as my theme. um, and then it's about, I think, shifting into how do we make it and the different tool, but it's not so, I think, just lines and boxes. Like, with it is also notes and additional imagery, and about the story. I think, especially when it comes to the painting part, I say we have a structure, but like we had this artist box, like the outdoor wooden box you'd carry your paint supplies with, that Van Gogh could have taken his supplies with. We made a massive one, like 8 foot tall, 8 foot wide. Um, and when we're talking about, it's not a brand new box, it has paint on it, smudges, dirt, the oils from your hand, always grabbing the handle, or like if you're right handed, always closing it and thinking about where the wear is. Um, where the the wear is on the box. There's a story in that, and that's
Mhm.
something that can come through in an elevation or a drawing. Um, how did a person use this? If you're talking about a theatrical set, all right, and there's some stairs, they're always walking down the middle of it. And so this part is worn. But or if someone on a door, they're always like pushing the door open with their hand, so maybe that part is a little more dirty or a little more worn. And even if something is nice and crisp and new and clean, like there's a story behind that of how new it is,
Mhm.
how recently was it installed, how recently was it made. Um, and then also talking about those things with Van Gogh, like yes, he was painting of a certain era, but this is a contemporary way to display his work through this virtual, immersive sort of surrounding and abstraction of his work. Um, there's a contemporary aesthetic to that, so kind of blending those two things, um, uh, has been the task, at least with them.
Yeah. And then, so I'm curious, just to like to keep breaking down how some things just starts as a sketch and then like an idea and just expanding it into this big, wonderful piece. Do you have any sort of ways that you like to go approaching this process and kind of like expanding the art and making it huge and
Yeah, well, when you asked me if I had an architecture background, I'm thinking now,
Mhm.
some of the training and advice I got in school that um, at least when you're building a building or a front of a building or a room, even like there are some architectural rules. Like, yeah, your walls have to be this way, and like a door frame has to be so big, and then windows
Mhm.
are typically this size, or the doorknob is typically at this height. So there are some rules, but I think so. Wow, that drafting you mentioned, which is like a huge like neoclassical sort of interior. Um, it's important, I think, to know the rules of how something is made, even if it's something funky and weird and a weird shape
Mhm.
or really abstract or even organic. I think it is made or how it actually works, and then you can bend the rules. Then you can put something upside down. Then you can make it ginormous, or you can
Mhm.
stretch it out and put it in a perspective and twist it around. So I think it's important to, so in your research, is to find real things that have been done, um, real tangible things that have been made, and then figure out what it means to bend reality or make that reality suit your story or suit your narrative. Um, yeah, I think we can make some stuff up from scratch, but I think there is so much out there that we can take inspiration from. And so there's practical things like in a theatrical set where, all right, I only have so much space. I have to make these walls a little smaller. But you still
Uh-huh.
are starting with like the real truth in our world. And then I think through our artistic creativeness, we can kind of make our own new truths, our own new futures, or our own new
Mhm.
paradigms in the worlds or experiences we're creating.
Yeah. And then so I'm curious, so when you're beginning that creative process, what are some things that inspire you in your projects?
I some It doesn't always work for every single show, but I do like to tap into fine art sometimes, and look at paintings or photography or even sculptures or other installations that have been done as inspiration. Like I like um, jumping to other creative products in a way, as opposed to just doing the architecture and just the I don't know. I don't want to say more boring, but just like someone had an idea, someone had an impulse, and they made something, and I want to like
Mhm.
get back. I think on that wavelength and pull those ropes together to make my own thing. Um, but um, there's this impulse that I have. Well, jumping kind of forwards in it, but sometimes when I walk into something I've designed or experienced for the first time, it's a little like kid at Disneyland. I'm like, wow, it's so amazing. I made this thing when so much beforehand in the process I've been on my computer or making a model and working in the miniature. Um, I love then walking into something so large scale. Um, but until I get to that point, until it's been made and the carpenters and painters have had their fun, I will play with card models. I will play
Mhm.
and scale miniature, and print things out real quick, rip them up, and tape them in something. And I've learned to not be so precious with a little thing that I've made, because maybe it works better when we cut it in half and when you're quickly looking at something, in a model. Um, I think I'm very tactile. I like playing with the things that you can touch and pulling on the fabric and seeing how it feels and how it flows. And
Mhm.
um, so, yeah, in this virtual world, sometimes it's been hard. Like I'm talking
Yeah.
about things, but I'm not. touching the things and showing you how big it is.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you have a favorite tactile thing you like to build your models out of?
Oh, well,
I guess it's different every time, but
it is
I'm
a little
just
different.
curious.
But I mean, I love making paint elevations, like, because in the model that's one scale, but then you make a larger paint elevation that's um,
Mm.
just a larger scale, so you can show more of the detail. Um, like do have a scenic art background, so like
Mhm.
painting for theater. So I since I don't do that main part as much, getting to do it a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
and use real paints, not just printing something out and handing a beautiful little paint elevation to painters and really creating wonderful relationships with my fabricators. That's my favorite part too because they're such
Mhm.
creative problem solvers. Um, but one thing I do love fabric though in some of my designs because even though there's different kinds of fabric, we all know what fabric is. We wear it every single day, and so we have such a
Mhm.
visceral sense of what fabric can feel like. So even if we can't touch it, we see it from afar. We see it draped in a certain way, or it's covering like a curtain, a massive amount of space, or it's clumped on the floor. We have an idea of what that feels like. And that's something I love tapping into, whether it's a heavy velvet curtain or a burlap or like a lacy sort of curtain. I'm always interested in the weight of fabric, the movement of fabric, and how light interacts with fabric.
Mhm. Absolutely. I'm curious. So, how do you change your set designs based on maybe where they take place or who's watching it, or when you know your audience? Does it change the way you could develop your designs at all, or do you possibly kind of want to have your experience be this experience, and then the people explore the world that you've created?
Um, well, I think there's definitely kind of two parts, I think, to that question.
Yeah.
I think to maybe more answer the latter one first, everyone's coming with their own sense of the world to my design and their own experiences of where they've been and um, how in spaces that they've felt good in, excited in, comfortable in, safe in, and thinking of just those adjectives or those feelings. This could be opposite for very different people. And so uh, I don't think I have to solve any problem. I mean, I don't think I have to create the perfect world. I think it's really just an inspiration for people to experience a world and then go out into their reality and
Mhm.
be changed or be inspired or have a question. Um, so I think I'm just giving an example of how the world could be, but as far as like changing a design or something, I think it depends on proximity for sure. Like in these immersive sort of experiences, and especially if it's meant to be a family friendly sort of thing. Like I am definitely thinking about the like 7-year old who's 3 feet tall. And looking up at the world from such a different perspective, and like maybe wanting to touch things, and things being bright and poppy and happy, and um, and big not only to like a young person but an adult. That is definitely a fun happy place for me to have been in the past few months. Is thinking about experiencing art and paint related things, from a very playful sort of place. Um, of course, I've also designed sets that are about very serious and tragic topics, that serve a very different function where that set stays where it is and the audience is 20 feet away in their seats, and that's the kind of relationship there is. But when resources have allowed and the process has allowed it, I love extending my world beyond the stage. Even if the actors like or performers stay up on stage, like if there's any way for my world to come beyond their boundary, um, I think that can help bridge. a story, depending on how people relate to the characters or on stage. We all exist in world, we all exist in space, and so if there's any other ways that I can bridge the reality of the performance to the reality that we may have as people experiencing the art, even if we can't physically touch it, I'm always conceptually thinking about how what is that connecting point. Um,
Could you maybe give an example with your Van Gogh exhibition?
Um, mm, I think that one feels a little trickier.
Alright.
I was in my head. I was thinking mostly of theatrical space where there are those boundaries. Like with immersive Van Gogh, like people have been able to go up and touch stuff, and like take pictures in front of it, and experience like a massive sunflower made out of PVC tube and plastic and metal and a hubcap, in a room that was like 40 by 40 feet wide. Um, so that and that the immersive Van Gogh experience has really allowed me, I think, to bring stuff to people as opposed to them having necessarily to reach for it.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely does have that amazing immersive experience, especially with Van Gogh paintings, like how you said earlier, they're this small painting, don't touch it, so many rules about it, and then you just get to be immersed in the atmosphere and really feel all the different sorts of settings around you. And so that must have been a really awesome experience to build from scratch. Were there any maybe spots along the way that were difficult in finding out, or you had to navigate your way around them, or
Um,
and then how did you solve them?
well, I mean, these feel a lot more like nuts and bolts challenges than so much like a creative challenge. I think that it is definitely different to create, say, like a sculpture as opposed to like a whole world. But in Minneapolis, for example, I was involved in the whole lobby, what colors the walls would be, and we had a mural painted by local scenic artists there that I designed, and um, I think one unique challenge to each venue, though, because some of them have been in historic buildings, some of them have been in just pretty commercial sort of buildings. But say for Charlotte, the venue was like an old Ford factory,
Oh
um,
wow.
and now Ford automobiles came after Van Gogh, but we felt like we
Yeah.
wanted to really honor the space that we were in too. So I'd say like the unique challenge from city to city is paying attention to what the building is itself, but then also the neighborhood in which it's in, and how to involve the local artists, in that community, and also how can we fuse in a way elements of Van Gogh's life or iconography from his work with the local landscape. So in Minneapolis, there's the famous Stone Arch Bridge, which was built in the time of Van Gogh's lifetime, and so
That's
we kind of
right.
fused the bridge itself, like an image of the bridge. Into, in a way, Starry Night Over the Rhone, which is one of his
Oh,
like
that sounds gorgeous. Oh my god.
with the lights like reflecting on the water, but like coming in between the arches of this bridge. And so here we are bringing like Van Gogh and Minneapolis together in this way. In Charlotte, we had these big sunflowers, like 12 feet tall, 16-foot tall sunflowers, made out of like industrial metal materials. And on one of them, we had like for the center of the sunflower, like a Ford hubcap. So again, just trying to like bridge some of these things together, and another collaborator in Charlotte, Bree Stallings, did created all these kind of beautiful painting and informational collage sort of panels that included local history of the region, the town, the city, um, of during the time like Van Gogh was alive. So I'd say that some of the challenges are really listening to each city and each venue, and adapting to the needs and qualities of each city.
So now I know that probably there's special things about each one, but do you have a favorite one?
I like Minneapolis because I got
Yeah.
to have a say in many more things.
Nice. That's awesome. Is there any like little secrets about it that you could share on this
um,
little interview?
I I I love that it was a place where we could kind of try out some new ideas, and hopefully those designs, like the artist box, they liked it a lot, and it's going to go to Cleveland. And so it was kind of a way for me to kind of throw out some new ideas that could be used again.
Mhm.
Um, so that's just been affirming that I've designed something good and cool, and that they want to see more of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. So the next thing I was curious about, I did notice that you do a lot of advocacy for LGBTQ and diversity, and I was just kind of wondering if do you incorporate that into your work a lot or not so much?
Well, I think a lot of my work is in service of a story,
Hmm.
and while of course can offer my personal experiences and identity, um, and I've loved all of the experience I've had on stories that center around the LGBT community. Um, I've been involved in projects that don't center around that, and ones that center around like the Black experience, Black American experience, and um, I really see myself as being in service to some of those stories. So I'm not like putting a rainbow or anything on every step that I do. Um, but I definitely gravitate towards the stories and projects that center a narrative about the LGBT community, and or involve other artists that belong to the community, and I mean, and considering the sort of panel we're on, an extra points if there's other mixed race, mixed Asian folks involved.
Absolutely. Oh, well, I really appreciate all the time that you've given to talk more about your art, more about your work, and really enlighten us to what it means to really take this exhibition that we see with all the beautiful big elements and then to kind of build it up and see how it starts from just like one small idea and can magically grow into something else. Is there any advice you give to anybody who possibly might want to pursue something like this?
Oh, well, there's a lot of things I'm just sort of thinking of, and also like I'm in Los Angeles because I'm starting my MFA at UCLA for design, and I was looking back at my statement, actually one of the statements that I wrote, as far as my own experience and how that relates to my understanding of space, and I might want to read a little snippet of it.
Absolutely.
Um, so. Um, I'm just going to read the first paragraph. Um, so, as a mixed race, trans, non binary designer, I have come to realize that I have strong imprints of how certain spaces and rooms have made me feel welcome and safe, or as an outsider or even a voyeur. With a white father and Chinese mother, I've become aware of how my upbringing has been shaped largely by whiteness and the patriarchy. To exist in a body that is both the oppressor and the oppressed is a far less unique experience than this country has yet to understand. Uh, Thus far, attempts to connect to my Chinese side have been fraught with a lack of language and space for queerness and non binary genders. So, my sense of seeing myself reflected in this world is a room with broken mirrors. To feel starstruck, yet frigid, contained, yet threatened, sharp yet playful, these dichotomies are what drive my visceral sense of creating spaces and working with materials as a designer.
Thank you very much. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
So with that, I would say like, well, I think we can get wrapped up in a lot of intellectualism and ideas, and it's important to understand theory and have the training and have the skills. I think the strongest skill someone can have in their toolkit is actually being is listening to their body, listening to how space, art, stories, narratives feel in their body, and like listen and go through the translating of a feeling into to emotions, to words. That's, I think, the strongest tool for interpreting and analyzing the world, and then creating from that.
I love that. All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for all your wonderful words and your time.
Sure.
Is there any social media platform that you want to share?
Oh, I I have a personal Instagram, but I'm just going to start a professional Instagram that is going to feature some of the work I've done in the Bay Area for the past few years, but also then kind of pick up when I start grad school. And it's I don't oh I know there's a way I can maybe type things, but it's at R Wong-Westbrooke Design. Um, that's my Instagram handle. And then that's the only thing I do. I don't know Twitter at all. But that's where my social media presence will be. But there's also my website at rwwestbrook.com.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that our time? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go over.